elderly woman approached the piano. The producers had brought her on the show to mock her, certain she'd embarrass herself. What they didn't know was that Beatrice Winters, once a piano prodigy, was about to give the performance of a lifetime. Beatrice B. Winters carefully arranged her small collection of framed photographs on the mantelpiece of her modest apartment. At 78, her hands moved with surprising grace, the same delicate precision that once made them dance across piano keys. Her apartment was simple but comfortable, filled with mementos of a life well lived, though perhaps not the life she had once imagined. In the corner of her living room sat an upright piano, its wood showing signs of age, but clearly well maintained. Every morning, like clockwork, Beatrice would sit at this piano and play for an hour before starting her day. It was her ritual, her moment of peace, a connection to the dreams of her youth. "Morning, old friend," she whispered, running her fingers lightly over the keys. 60 years earlier, a teenage Beatrice had been the talk of her hometown, a genuine musical prodigy who could play Chopin with the emotional depth of someone 3 times her age. Her music teacher had called her once in a generation, promising her a future at the finest conservatories in the country. But life has a way of redirecting even the most promising paths. Financial constraints forced her to take a full-time job straight out of high school. Working days at a department store and evenings waiting tables, Beatrice simply couldn't find the hours needed for the rigorous practice schedule of a professional pianist. "There's always next year," she'd tell herself. But next year became the year after, and soon decades had passed. Marriage came and went. Her husband Jim had passed 15 years ago. Children never arrived, but through it all, her piano remained her constant companion. She never stopped playing, even if the grand stages and concert halls remained dreams unrealized. Retirement brought both freedom and loneliness. Her small pension was enough to get by, but not much more. These days, Beatrice played at the local community center twice a week, offering free lessons to neighborhood children who couldn't afford formal training. "Miss B, why aren't you famous?" one of her young students had asked last week. Beatrice had smiled, her blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sometimes, sweetheart, life takes you down different roads than the ones you plan to travel." What Beatrice didn't tell the child was that not a day went by when she didn't wonder what might have been, not with regret exactly, but with quiet curiosity. How different would her life have been if circumstances had allowed her to pursue music professionally? Little did she know, fate was about to offer her an unexpected, though questionable, opportunity to find out. Mark Davenport had been producing America's Got Talent Tonight for 7 seasons. While not the most watched talent competition, the show had carved out a comfortable niche in evening television, particularly among older viewers. At 42, Mark considered himself a pragmatist. Television was a business, and his job was to deliver ratings. "What do we have lined up for next week's show?" he asked, scanning the list of contestants during the production meeting. "The usual mix," replied Sarah, his assistant producer. "Aspiring singers, dance troupes, the occasional novelty act." Same old," Mark sighed. "We need something different. Viewers are getting bored with the predictable acts. We need something that'll get people talking, social media buzz, water cooler conversations." It was at that exact moment that Mark remembered the elderly woman he'd spotted playing piano at Riverside Community Center last week. He had stopped by to pick up his nephew from a basketball program and heard music coming from a small room down the hall. The old lady had been playing something simple, a basic tune for what appeared to be a children's lesson. Nothing extraordinary, but there was something about her poised posture that struck him as camera-worthy. She had that classic grandmother look, perfectly coiffed silver hair, gentle smile, cardigan sweater, the kind of appearance that would create an immediate visual expectation for the audience. "I've got it," Mark said, straightening up. "I saw this elderly woman playing piano at a community center. She's got the perfect look. The viewers will expect something quaint, maybe Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or something equally basic." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "So, what's the angle?" "The unexpected. We present her like she's going to play something simple, maybe even have Bradley make a few gentle jokes. The audience will be expecting something cute but forgettable. If she's terrible, it's a light-hearted moment. If she's decent, it's a sweet surprise. Either way, it's different from our usual acts. Sarah appeared hesitant. Isn't that a bit manipulative? Mark waved his hand dismissively. It's entertainment, Sarah. We're not making fun of her. We're creating a moment. Besides, if she's terrible, Bradley knows how to pivot and make it charming rather than embarrassing. No harm done. What Mark didn't mention was that in the back of his mind, he was counting on the contrast between the woman's elderly appearance and the expected mediocrity of her performance to create exactly the kind of viral social media moment the show needed. The following Tuesday afternoon found Beatrice closing the lid on the piano at the community center. Her small group of students had just left, backpacks bouncing as they raced toward waiting parents. Teaching brought her joy, a way to keep music alive in her life while passing on her knowledge to a new generation. She was gathering her sheet music when an unfamiliar voice called out, "Mrs. Winters." Beatrice looked up to see a well-dressed younger woman with a tablet in hand. "It's Miss, actually. And yes, I'm Beatrice Winters." The woman smiled brightly, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Chen from America's Got Talent tonight. We're interested in having you appear on our show next week." Beatrice's hand stilled on her music sheets. "I beg your pardon?" Sarah launched into her well-rehearsed pitch. "Our producer saw you playing last week and was very impressed with your presence. We're doing a special segment highlighting talented seniors, and we think you'd be perfect." "There must be some mistake," Beatrice said, shaking her head. "I'm just a piano teacher. I play for these children and occasionally at church. I'm hardly television material." "That's exactly what makes you perfect," Sarah insisted. "You represent everyday Americans who have kept music in their lives. Our viewers will love your authenticity." Beatrice hesitated. Television had never been part of her life plan. The thought of performing in front of cameras and a studio audience made her stomach tighten. And yet, a small voice inside her whispered of opportunity, of the chance to play for an audience larger than she'd ever imagined. "I don't know," she said finally. "At my age, I'm not sure I'm up for that kind of excitement." Sarah sensed her wavering and pressed gently. "It's just one piece, 5 minutes at most. Plus, we offer a modest appearance fee." She named a figure that, while not substantial by television standards, represented nearly 2 months of Beatrice's pension. Beatrice thought of her aging piano at home, how the G above middle C had been sticking lately. The repair costs had seemed out of reach, but with this unexpected windfall. "If I were to do this," she said cautiously, "I could play any piece of my choosing?" Sarah nodded quickly. "Absolutely. Whatever makes you comfortable." Beatrice took a deep breath. Perhaps this was life, offering her a small taste of the road not taken. Not exactly Carnegie Hall, but still, a real stage, a real audience. "Very well," she said with a slight nod. "I think I'd like to give it a try." Sarah beamed. "Wonderful. You won't regret it, Miss Winters." Beatrice only hoped that was true. The television studio was a maze of cables, equipment, and harried staff members speaking into headsets. Beatrice clutched her purse tightly as a production assistant, a young man with a clipboard who'd introduced himself as Kevin, led her through the backstage area. "Through here, Miss Winters," Kevin said, holding open a door marked Green Room. The space was unexpectedly comfortable, sofas, snacks, a small refrigerator stocked with drinks. But Beatrice couldn't help noticing she was the only contestant present. "Where are the other performers?" she asked. Kevin checked his clipboard. "Oh, you're in a special segment. The others are in a different preparation area." Before she could inquire further, the door opened and Mark Davenport strode in, his confident smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Miss Winters, so glad you could join us. I'm Mark, executive producer." He shook her hand firmly. "All set for your big moment?" "I believe so," Beatrice replied, smoothing her cream-colored dress, the nicest one she owned, purchased years ago for a niece's wedding. Though I'm still not quite sure why you wanted me specifically. Mark's smile widened. America loves authentic stories, Miss Winters. You represent. Well, let's call it the unexpected. Something in his tone made Beatrice pause. Before she could pursue that thought, the door opened again and a makeup artist bustled in. We need to get you camera ready, Mark explained. Lisa here will take good care of you. As Lisa applied powder to minimize the shine on Beatrice's forehead, Beatrice overheard a conversation just outside the partially open door. Is the old lady still up for this? A male voice, presumably the host, Bradley Walker. Mark's voice responded, absolutely. Audience is perfect tonight, too. Lots of younger people. The contrast will be even better than I hoped. And she has no idea. Bradley's voice trailed off into a chuckle. None. Just remember to play it up a bit before she starts. Set the tone. A cold feeling settled in Beatrice's stomach. The conversation confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. She wasn't here because they thought she was talented. She was here to be some kind of joke. Lisa, noticing her suddenly tense posture, smiled sympathetically. First time on TV? Don't worry, everyone gets nervous. Beatrice nodded absently, her mind racing. She could leave now, of course, walk out and return to her quiet life. But something kept her seated. Pride, perhaps, or maybe the stubborn streak her mother had always said would get her into trouble. If they wanted a show, she thought with sudden determination, she would give them one, just not the one they were expecting. 15 minutes before showtime, Beatrice sat alone in the green room, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Outside, she could hear the increasing buzz of the audience finding their seats, the occasional burst of laughter, the building anticipation. She closed her eyes and did what she always did before playing, mentally walked through her piece, her fingers making tiny movements in the air as if pressing invisible keys. She had chosen Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. It had been years since she'd performed it for anyone other than herself, but her fingers remembered every note, every nuance. A light knock on the door interrupted her concentration. 5 minutes, Miss Winters, Kevin announced, poking his head in. She nodded, rising slowly to her feet. Her knees protested slightly, a reminder of her age that she chose to ignore. The piano is ready on stage, Kevin continued. Is there anything else you need? No, thank you, Beatrice replied calmly, though her heart had begun to race. I'm as ready as I'll ever be. As Kevin led her toward the stage, Beatrice caught snippets of conversation between stagehands. The grandma pianist should be good for a laugh. Bradley's going to have a field day with this one. Each comment strengthened her resolve. She'd spent a lifetime accepting limitations imposed by circumstances. She wouldn't accept being dismissed before she'd played a single note. They reached the wings of the stage where Mark was giving last-minute instructions to Bradley Walker, the show's charismatic host. Bradley's television persona was charm personified, quick-witted, handsome in a conventional way, with just the right balance of respect and gentle ribbing for contestants. Mark noticed her arrival and quickly wrapped up his conversation. Miss Winters, perfect timing. Now remember, just a simple piece, something easy and comfortable. No need to push yourself. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. He didn't expect anything remarkable from her. In fact, it seemed he was counting on the opposite. I know exactly what I'm going to play, Beatrice assured him, her blue eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief that went unnoticed. Excellent. Mark clapped his hands together. Bradley will introduce you, have a little chat, and then you'll play. Just follow his lead. On stage, Bradley was warming up the audience with his trademark humor. Through the curtain, Beatrice could see the theater packed with people, predominantly younger faces, looking expectantly toward the stage. Our next contestant is a bit different from what you've seen tonight, Bradley announced. We're slowing things down, taking a little detour from our high-energy acts. The audience murmured curiously. Coming up, we have a lovely lady who's been playing piano at her local community center. She's here to share a little musical moment with us. Let's give a warm welcome to 78-year-old Beatrice Winters. The applause was polite but tepid as Beatrice stepped onto the stage. The lights were brighter than she'd expected, momentarily disorienting her. She blinked, then made her way toward Bradley and the gleaming grand piano that awaited her. She could feel the audience's eyes on her, could sense their immediate assessment based solely on her appearance. An elderly woman in a modest dress moving carefully across the stage. Their expectations were written on their faces. This would be cute, perhaps mildly entertaining, but certainly not impressive. Bradley met her halfway, his smile broad and theatrical. Beatrice, welcome to the show. Are you nervous? Beatrice returned his smile with a serene one of her own. Not anymore, young man. Not anymore. The spotlights felt warm on Beatrice's skin as she stood center stage beside Bradley, the massive grand piano waiting just a few feet away. The audience's polite applause had already died down, replaced by a few scattered whispers and the distinct feeling of people waiting for something to be over before the next, more exciting act began. So, Beatrice, Bradley's voice boomed through the theater. I understand you've been playing piano most of your life. Yes, since I was 5 years old, she replied, her voice surprisingly steady despite the cameras and the sea of faces before her. That's a long time, Bradley quipped, earning a ripple of laughter. And what will you be playing for us tonight? Mary Had a Little Lamb? Chopsticks, perhaps? More laughter, louder this time. Beatrice noticed a few audience members already smirking, phones raised to capture what they anticipated would be a viral moment, an elderly woman fumbling through a simple tune. Actually, Beatrice said calmly, I'll be playing Franz Liszt's La Campanella. Bradley's practiced smile faltered for just a moment. Clearly, he'd been briefed to expect something much simpler. From the corner of her eye, Beatrice saw Mark step forward in the wings, his brow furrowed. La Campa, what now? Bradley recovered quickly, playing up his confusion for comedy. Sounds fancy. Is that like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in Italian? The audience laughed again, and Beatrice smiled politely. Not exactly. It's considered one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire. Bradley raised his eyebrows theatrically. Well, ambitious. I like it. He turned to the audience with an exaggerated wink. Let's see how this goes, shall we? As Bradley guided her to the piano, he leaned in, speaking quietly so only she could hear. Maybe start with something easier. No need to put yourself on the spot. I know exactly what I'm doing, Beatrice replied softly, her eyes meeting his with quiet determination. Bradley shrugged almost imperceptibly before turning back to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Beatrice Winters. He stepped away, leaving Beatrice alone at the magnificent grand piano. It was far superior to her modest upright at home or the worn community center piano, a true concert instrument. She adjusted the bench, taking her time, aware of the shifting atmosphere in the theater as people grew restless. Some were already looking at their phones, others whispered to their neighbors. Beatrice caught Mark's eye off stage. He was speaking urgently into his headset, perhaps already planning how to cut her segment short when she inevitably struggled with the demanding piece. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the cool ivory beneath her fingertips. For a moment, she closed her eyes, shutting out the lights, the cameras, the doubtful faces. In that brief darkness, she was 18 again, full of promise and possibility, her whole life ahead of her. When she opened her eyes, Beatrice was no longer nervous. She was no longer worried about being mocked or underestimated. She was simply a musician about to play. Her fingers struck the first notes of the delicate, sparkling introduction to La Campanella, light, precise, and perfectly controlled. Each crystalline note hung in the air with bell-like clarity, exactly as Liszt had intended. In the front row, a young woman's jaw dropped slightly. Backstage, Mark froze mid-sentence, his hands still raised with instructions to prepare for a quick transition. And Beatrice, feeling the familiar rush that came only from making music, allowed herself a small smile as her hands began to move faster, the piece's notorious technical demands unfurling before her like an old friend coming to visit after a long absence. As Beatrice's fingers flew across the keys with astonishing agility, the atmosphere in the theater transformed. The initial notes had captured attention. Now, as she navigated the piece's incredibly difficult leaps and rapid-fire repetitions, she commanded it completely. La Campanella *, meaning the little bell, lived up to its name as Beatrice's right hand created delicate tinkling bell sounds in the upper register, while her left provided the harmonic foundation. The piece's notorious difficulty came from the extreme jumps between registers, often requiring the pianist to hit precise notes far apart on the keyboard in rapid succession. Beatrice executed these jumps flawlessly. Her hands, which had earlier shown the slight tremor of age as she'd adjusted her dress, now moved with supernatural precision. Decades of playing had built muscle memory that no amount of time could erase.